you so much for coming and being here. My name is Taylor. I am the Business Development Specialist and Events Coordinator for Barnes & Noble Northgate. We're so happy you guys could all join us on this rainy Saturday and that you're all not at SakuraCon, which I didn't know was happening today. So thank you for coming today, or if you came from SakuraCon and you did experience the I-5 traffic, thank you for being here. We have 5 incredible authors. We are so grateful that they are giving us their time. MJ Kuhn came all the way across the country to be here for this panel, so let's give her a big thank you for coming. We also have Django Wexler, Bryan Asher, Zack Argyle. It's going to be a fabulous day. Stacey Brown's new book just came out, Silvertongue Devil. So we've got a whole bunch of releases. We will be doing a giveaway for Thick as Thieves, the highly anticipated sequel to Among Thieves. So we will be drawing that after the talk, so just make sure to stay seated. Don't jump up in the signing line just yet, because we'll definitely do that giveaway, because I want to make sure if you do win that giveaway, you can get that book signed. So we'll draw that right after. There are just a couple to give away, so best of luck to all. Our panel will be moderated today by the amazing Steph Sloma. Steph is a publishing professional with over 8 years of experience getting paid to talk about books. She has been a YA and children's librarian, a book publicist, a marketer, a book blogger, and most importantly, a reader since she was 2. She can usually be found reading on the couch or listening to an audiobook while walking her dog. Everybody give a big round of applause for Steph.
Hello. We ready to go?
We are ready to go.
All right. I feel like Taylor already introduced all of the authors for me, but I will also introduce them. First up, we have MJ Kuhn, who wrote Among Thieves with the morally gray characters of my dreams, and the upcoming sequel?
Yeah.
Sequel. Next, we have Stacey Marie Brown, who has written many books, contemporary fantasy, and the recent Silvertongue Devil, which is pirate. Next up is Bryan Asher. His most recent release is Fear of Montcroy with freaking amazing vampires. I am like obsessed with vampires. Then next we have Zack Argyle, who wrote the Threadlight series, started with Voice of War. And then Django Wexler, who wrote Burning Blade and Silver Eye series, which is Ashes of the Sun and Emperor of Ruin. So welcome to our amazing authors.
I'll do just one last quick housekeeping announcement, because I forgot. I just wanted to let everybody know that we are filming. Camera is back there, so if you do not want to be in that, you are welcome to move to the opposite side of the aisle. Realize that might be a little late, as you've all already selected your seats, but there we go.
Surprise! You're on my YouTube channel now. With my 80 subscribers.
Hey, it'll grow.
I know.
That's okay.
Brick by brick.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the theme of our panel today is nightmares and daydreams. I might have gotten that the other way, but I wanted to see if any of your nightmares or daydreams have shown up in scenes in your books.
I can start, I guess. Or Zach, you going? Okay. I don't think I've had any specifically for my existing books, although I do have a short story I'm working on from a nightmare / daydream where, or dream, where essentially there's kind of a post-apocalyptic planet, and there's a young boy traveling around. He's by himself, and then I had this dream where this warrior fell out of this pod from the sky and landed, and then he goes to find this warrior, and then I woke up. So now I got to figure out the rest of the story. But I at least have the primer to start. So.
Yeah, so I don't think so for daydreams, I would argue that all of my books are just my daydreams. It's what I'm doing when I'm supposed to be working. But no, for nightmares, I have not written any books on them yet, but I do have a notes file on my phone full of random nonsense that I jot down when I wake up at 3 in the morning. And a lot of it will be random nonsense forever, but maybe one of them will become a book, I don't know.
Yeah, the same. I haven't actually written any nightmares because it'd then be full of spiders and mushrooms. And but my daydream's the same. Yeah, all my men. That's basically, yeah, I write.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's just like the process of writing, you know, is writing my daydreams down. There's a few things that like come out of my nightmares. These books have a lot of like really gooey, flesh warped creatures that I feel like I was just like, what's the most horrifying thing I can think of? And like, you know, hit that as hard as you can.
So I'm a dad. Hi. I have two kids. I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I remember when my 8-year-old was born, I just became a dad. I was sitting there just like holding him, and I was like, and I obviously read a lot of fantasy and play Dungeons and Dragons. And so I was sitting there looking at my kid, and I was like, what if my kid like was magical? And that's where this series came from. It was basically like the point of view of like the parents of the chosen one. And so it came from me just sitting there with my son in my arms being like, what if he was magical? That would be so cool.
Would it be cool or is that a nightmare, right?
That's
like
the question.
For the chosen one.
What are you going to do for that? Yeah.
It's like a magical pageant dad. Love it.
Son, get in there and pull that sword out of the sword.
I love that. I'm actually going to go off something you said, Django. So you said your fleshy, weird monster things are kind of one of the darkest things that you could think of. What is the darkest thing that each of you have written into your books? And that could be a monster, it could be a horrifying scene, a villain, whatever you want.
I mean, yeah, that's tough. You know, it's probably some of that. In Ship of Smoke and Steel, our main character is like trying to help someone, and instead she turns him into a giant tumor, and then he explodes, which is like pretty horrifying, you know.
Horrifying.
So I might go with that. It's like, I don't know. If you've seen Akira, it's kind of like that. The end of Akira.
Who can beat Django?
I was gonna say I'll go because mine is definitely not gonna beat that. So I'm just gonna bring it back down a little bit. So mine don't have like a ton of horror stuff in it, but I do have invisible monsters, and they smell like roses. And so I was like, what can I take that's like normally such like a pleasant thing and turn it into like something like as soon as you smell it you're like, oh no.
That is the monsters are ruined roses.
Now. Yeah, I can't. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Well, I also don't write a ton of like horror or anything because I'm a giant baby and I'm afraid of everything. Like to the point that I want to watch The Last of Us because everyone's watching it and I never know what anyone's talking about, but I'm gonna be too scared to go.
Stacey can't watch that because of mushrooms, right?
Yeah, if mushrooms are in your nightmares, you're done. Yeah, like literally like mushroom zombies, basically. Yeah. I can't watch it. But yeah,
Don't
no.
do Super Mario Bros. Either.
I can't watch a single blockbuster thing this year. It's all about the fungi. I love it. But yeah, so I don't really have anything. My main villain in Among Thieves is a lot smarter than me, which was terrifying to write. So yeah, I can't. How do I write something smarter than me? It's hard.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So my newest book is a horror book, and I do have one large toad monster that comes after one of the heroes in the swamp, and he's trying to run and fight from it as this giant toad is basically like, you know, lick tongue trying to snatch him up. So that's one. The other.
There's a community online somewhere. That's their thing.
Stacey's gonna use it in a very different way.
Poor Stacey.
My mind's the dark place.
This is actually the roast of Stacey. That's what the channel really is. The other is actually, there's a flashback in my book. I won't spoil it, but essentially it's the story of how the one hero survived all of his friends being slaughtered, which involves his best friend, and it's very emotional. And writing that was very like emotional / terrifying. So on the more emotional end, I would say that flashback is probably the latest one.
You just brought us down. You just
Right? I like it. Centering. Gotta get back under control here.
So I feel like your characters all have like dreams and they've planned out their future, but most of them are dashed kind of in a single event. Did you find writing your characters' nightmares cathartic, awful, difficult, anything like that?
I would say there were times it was tough, like that flashback specifically, like when you're writing characters, at least for me, I feel like I'm living in their shoes, and all the decisions they make are based on the decisions I think they would make. So I've had moments where I've had to pivot on my outline or my plot because something wasn't earned yet or a decision wasn't made by that character at that moment. So yeah, I think it can be cathartic, but in a weird way, not for me, more so for the character, because I'm like following their journey.
Yeah, so for my characters, I always like to joke that I have super flawed characters because I just like to take like my own character flaws and like pass them out like little party favors on my characters. So I do feel like it is a little bit cathartic because, like, you know, when they're making a mistake or they screw something up, like, you know, maybe I'm gonna help them fix it later. Maybe I'm gonna be evil author and not help them fix it later. But you know, either way, I get to see how it would play out if I was in this kind of terrible scenario. So.
Well, I'm a total pantser, so everything I write, I'm experiencing with them, and on the first time. So all the torture I write, because I write a lot of like sick, twisted stuff. So
You didn't answer though.
Yeah, says the person who didn't answer.
sorry, was that horror? I thought that was
Prove it.
well, so now you guys are distracting me again. So I don't know about cathartic because a lot of times I'll actually need to walk. Have to take a walk after because I will feel it so much. So sometimes I need to take a break from what's happening to them because I'm experiencing it with them. So I can't say it's cathartic. Oh, except when I get the villain. He deserves it.
I mean, I love writing nightmares because it's kind of lays your characters bare. Like, you get to sort of address their innermost like personality and problems in a way that can, you know, if you're sort of writing the way they conduct themselves in the waking world, it is more guarded, and then in nightmares you can kind of like dissect people in their most basic form. So it's a lot of fun for me.
I feel the same way about the dream side, where these characters have things that they desire and that they're dreaming about. And one of my favorite things is to take those dreams and right when they're about to get them, figure out what you're going to do about that, right? Whether it's not going to happen, or maybe it happens in a way that they didn't expect. And I think as a writer, that's like one of my favorite things to do is you set up the expectation this thing's going to happen, but then it doesn't quite happen the way you expect it to. It's really fun to do.
How do you keep your character?
Wait, did you just say it's the worst?
It's the worst.
I want to be clear. As authors, we know it's the worst.
But like, it's got to happen, or else the book would just.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
You know,
Like
you got
behind the
200
scenes,
pages
like,
left. You got to put something
Yes,
in.
that's
there.
the author. It is.
Everybody gets 75% of the way in, you're like, oh, things are about to go very, very bad.
Yep.
I've actually like, my wife in particular will sometimes just like at that point just like stop reading the book. She's like, I don't want to do the end. It's the old joke that like the death of the author was revenge.
So all of you are writing fantasy, but how do you keep your characters grounded in a fantasy world where things are, you know, nowhere near what they are in our world?
You know, regardless of genre, it's kind of all about people. Like, most of the characters are humans, or at least kind of like humans, even if they're elves or dragons or whatever. And so, you know, the groundedness is all, you know, whether you can blow up mountains or fly or whatever, is people still have like goals and fall in love and fears and all that stuff, and you know, kind of sticking to that. You know, you just have to make sure that as an author you appropriately challenge your characters, so that, you know, if they have unlimited power, then, like, you know, getting a new bank card is not like their difficulty for the day. They probably need to be doing something, and in particular, like, you know, if your character is Superman, then his problems need to be things like, you know, is it ethical for me to do this, or like, I'm in love and it's unrequited, rather than like, can I punch that guy hard enough? Obviously he can punch the guy hard enough. Yeah.
So, yes to all that. First off, as someone who's done a fair amount of like international travel, people are the same everywhere. Like whether you're on some faraway planet or not, right? I think humans are all the same, and we all have the same flaws. And so I think as long as you're kind of focusing on the flaws of the character and grounding those in what is like familiar, and I think the world becomes just like a secondary thing, kind of like what Django was talking about, where the characters themselves become the first. And yeah, so I think kind of grounding it in the flaws really helps ground the whole world itself.
They've answered it. Just regurgitating. Yeah, I mean, I write realism in fantasy, so again, everything would be about, I like character-driven plots, so it'll be about, them trying to figure something out together. So it's really, to me, yes, there's a lot of outside elements of magic and fairies and tree fairies or whatever, but the basic core is just human. What we love, our loves, our hates, we all bleed the same, we all cry, we all, so that to me is, it's always going to bring it down to just human level.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. For myself, to make sure that I'm setting myself up to like create that when I'm writing, and I don't get stuck, because I do feel like, especially if you're writing, you read a lot of fantasy and then you write something fantasy, it can be easy to like fall into too far into a trope of a character or like an archetype or something like that. So during my planning process, because I think pantsers are wizards, for the record. I don't know how you do it. I am a huge plotter. Like people make fun of me. I plot in Microsoft Excel. Super type A. But I do a process of before I get to that point where I build my characters, and I do a character interview. So like I will ask each of my characters like 20, 30 questions and answer in their voice. I mean, some of them are like big questions, like what's the worst way to die, or like something really dark, but some of them are like, what's your Starbucks order, right? That's not going to be relevant in their world, most likely, but it's fun and it makes me feel like more like they're a real person that I know. So that just like helps me make sure that I ground them when I'm writing them, if that makes sense.
That's a really good example. Love it. I'll give a specific example from my first book. I decided to have 3 heroes. They're all pretty typical fantasy characters. One of them is a young boy. And all of the characters can have a power where essentially an aura around them allows them to kind of like shield a blow, make a blow stronger, make a jump higher. It's pretty basic for them. There's not much more that can happen with it. But this young boy, he grows up, he's like, I want to be in the military, I want to be a hero, I want to be like, that type of person. And then he discovers that his aura can actually be manipulated further, and he can do more than most people. And he thinks it's this great opportunity. And when he finally shows it to his teacher actually is scared for him and makes him hide it, because the only person who's ever had that power before is the kingdom's like greatest enemy. And so it creates this whole political situation for him where he's being pulled from both sides. And so when I think about characters, it's like, what is this character going through, the changes in his life, and what he's up against. And so even though there's this big magical power, everything he's dealing with is very specific to anyone else who would be in a situation where they're kind of between two sides, or they have to hide something about themselves that is actually pretty exciting. So
Nice. Okay, so do you find that there are fantasy tropes that you keep returning to in your books? I know, like, MJ, you've only written 2, but you're working on more books, and like Stacey, you have a large backlist. So are there things that you often return to, or you try to keep it fresh every time?
I think the things that I return to is I love adventure, and so I generally have kind of badass heroes. I like adventure. I have people who, want to get in the fight. Not everybody does, but I have a lot of people who want to get in the fight, who are courageous. I love the idea of having stories that really inspire people to be that way. Since I was a kid, I really had a lot of that in my life. The X-Men were always like fighting. They were always putting themselves out there. They didn't give up, and I like to share that. So that'd be one trope I kind of have quite a bit of.
Yeah, I wish I could remember who I heard say it, but I heard someone say once that, like, as writers, we tend to write the same story over and over again. Like, it's a different story. It's got entirely new characters and a whole new plot, but it's the same story. And as I'm looking through, I do only have 1 book out, 1 book coming in July. Woo! But, I have several others that I've written that are, waiting in the wings. And you know, at the heart of all of those stories, I have a lot of themes of like morally gray characters and redemption, things like that. And these are tropes that I find myself returning to a lot. Or, you know, the found family. God, I love a good found family. I'm obsessed with a good found family, and I keep putting them in there. So yeah, those are some of my little pet favorites.
Yeah, mine's found family too. I think I love that aspect of, because not always who you're born with, you know, not always a great family that you're forced with. So to me, I like the family that you choose. So I think adventure is always part of it. I like badass women, and I like ones that come underdogs, like ones that like they may have been high on the thing and then they're taken down, and how they go through all the crap they have to get, you know, to rise back up. So I like that kind of, I like everything against my characters. Basically, like you just dump everything on them, and it's not my fault because it's them. I just not me.
You
So
just believe in them.
yeah. So all the torture that goes, it's them. They like that stuff. Sorry. So, and I also big enemies to lovers. I love that kind of, and I guess it's the friction. I like taking opposites and pushing them together and going, okay, let's see how these two act. Again, it's like part of my acting, directing background. It's like, let's take the worst situations, throw them in that, and let's see how they get out. So I guess that's all that, you know, venture, action, you know, but it's all that push and pull. I love push and pull. So
I don't think I have a common element through all my books. I mean, I've been doing this for a while now, but I tend to go through like phases where I get really into some like particular thing, and you can often tell which of my books were written like they were written at the same time, even if they came out at different times, because like they have similar like elements in there. Like there, a couple of the books have like specific things like, you know, healing magic that can also be used for evil is a thing that gets explored in a couple books. And there's some like this series has a lot of like Star Wars reference in it. It's because like basically I sat around late at night at cons talking about Star Wars next Gladstone, and I was like, I gotta write this book now. That's kind of where that came from. But so not like overall, but there's definitely like chunks where and then eventually I get bored of it and like hook onto something else.
I think for me, the two main ones are maybe the opposite of Bryan. So the reluctant hero is definitely something that shows up a lot in mine, and then family, just in general, kind of intergenerational. There's a lot of married people. The new series I'm working on is 3 married couples saving the world. Is kind of is the plan. Yeah, that's probably it. Probably because I feel like I'm like a family guy myself, and so I think it bleeds out there. And there's not enough families out there in fantasy. Everyone's an orphan. No more.
I can see them like they're bitching about the dishes. They're like, oh, honey, okay, we gotta save the world.
It's worse than children's fantasy, man. If you suspect that your kids are children's fantasy protagonists, like, watch out. You're gonna be dead. Your only possible escape is just to be so completely oblivious that like your kids can wander out and fight monsters and you wouldn't notice.
Don't stop them.
Yeah, I often they're like, I'm gonna go to my room and read and not pay attention to any noises.
Okay, so if you want to pass it back to Zach, actually, I'm gonna ask each of you an individual question. Reading your book really felt like playing a video game to me. So I wanted to see if that was an influence, video games, Dungeons and Dragons, if they were an influence for your book.
Probably. I don't know. Not intentionally.
Okay.
Like they just write like a whole genre called lit RPG, and I don't think it's really a ton like that. But yeah, it's like fast paced, like a video game, very cinematic. I think in a lot of ways.
That was it. Like I could picture the whole screen.
You can feel like the cutscenes of a video game. You could definitely see that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't not purposeful. But
okay.
I do love video games, and obviously.
Well.
Video game. Yeah, pick between all of your favorite babies.
Yep.
My favorite one?
Or a favorite one. I'm just
I mean, probably Skyrim.
Awesome.
All right. Django. I really liked how Geyer and Maya, I hope I said Geyer right.
That's great.
Okay. Were like two sides of a coin, kind of. One was very rule oriented, one is very not. Can you talk about what writing those characters were like in contrast to one another?
I mean, that's kind of, what was it like? That's sort of the whole focus of these books, is that you have these two characters, one of whom is kind of abducted at an early age and taken to, told that you're a wizard, Hattie, and to the magical order of wizard knights and raised to be a defender of the realm. But the other one, who, saw his sister brutally abducted at age 5, becomes like a rebel and kind of murderer. And so that contrast, it's kind of like something I have to nurture, because I want to highlight it at every step, right, until obviously the story progresses and our brother and sister get back together, but pushing it as far as possible was sort of the experience of that, and sort of causing decisions that cause it to stretch further apart. I have a tendency sometimes to have characters all kind of agree with each other too much, because I'm like, you guys are all smart, logical people, you should be on the same side. And so sometimes I have to consciously fight against that if I need people to stay separate. These are from my kids' books, from the Forbidden Library.
Talk about how Stacey's been daydreaming the entire time. Stuffed animal torture.
The person who didn't want to answer what's something dark you read
Very
is
scary
probably
in
the
there.
darkest person.
Yeah.
Okay, so Stacey, I know that your fantasy worlds are all interconnected. So can you talk about what that was like? Because it's across different series. Silver-tongued Devil is related, but it's pirates versus fae.
And none of them were planned that way.
Okay.
As a pantser, everything kind of just, I do feel half the time I'm just somebody that sits down and I write what they tell me to. So I started with the Darkness series, and that kind of just kept going, and I'm like, well, I love the fae, because I bring everything in it. I don't have just fae. I have, vampires, I have, dark dwellers, I made up things, so I was like, well, I really want to stay in this world. So then I, kind of everything that they started doing, it started going, well, I could write a story off of that, and a story off of that. And then so it just kind of kept growing. And so I did Savage Lands, and I set it 20 years later, and then it was like, well, I got to go back to this pirate. So I'm kind of connecting them all, and they just do it for me. So I just am half the time I'm on the phone with my mom, because she's really good about my kind of who I talk to, and I bounce ideas off of, and I'll be like, oh my God, so I'm shocked half the time when I'm writing these things. So I mean, I am a pantser. I think I'm gonna write a plot, I'll outline it, and that thing will be thrown away in about 5 minutes. So I definitely, again, when I talk about my acting directing background, is every character comes full life to me. I know exactly there, and so I don't make any character that just one-dimensional. All of them have some back history, so that's usually what starts creeping up, and people are like, oh my God, I want more, I want their story now. So I know people from Savage Lands want Ash's story, so that's going to kick off another thing. And then I have this other bring with the last book a kind of a carnival theme, where that's going to now take another story off of it. So it just keeps kind of spiraling that way. So again, it's all unplanned. They just kind of take over for me, and until that my muse goes away, I'm going to love them and appreciate them and take it all.
So, love it.
I love it.
So MJ, your characters are, yes, there's a kid here.
What? They're all angels.
And backstabbers, and we'll say morally gray.
Yeah.
So how did you write about characters that are doing what for them is a good thing, but it's really a bad thing in the overall scheme?
It's so fun. Oh my gosh, it's so fun. It's really fun to write characters that are just sucky people, man. It's just a good time. So no, I think that what helps me, because Among Thieves, for just if those that aren't familiar, it's a fantasy heist story, but every member of our heist team is secretly planning to screw over everybody else in the team. So they each have their own mission and their own thing. And I think what helped me craft that is that none of them are just doing it like for the lulz. Like all of them have a reason why they're screwing everyone over, right? So it's, you know, yeah, there's like, yeah, for the lulz. Every single one of them though, if they don't get, so like they're each trying to get the loot for their own reasons, if they don't get it, like it's all over for me, right? Like that's it, game over, we're done. And so I think that it's my goal when writing it was for it's multi-perspective, so there's 5 points of view, and I was hoping that as readers are reading it, they're reading a Nash chapter and they're like, gosh, I hope Nash gets it. But then they read, you know, Raya's chapter and they're like, ooh, but I really want Raya to get it. And they know that they can't all win because only the best thief may win, right? So that was kind of, you know, I feel like as long as the character has a reason for making a terrible decision that makes sense logically, right? You can see how they got there. You can see they've been backed into corner after corner after corner, and now they're a caged beast. They're scratching and clawing to get their way out. I feel like that helps us forgive them their trespasses a little bit, maybe.
Did you find as the writer that you were also writing a chapter and like, I want this character to get it and this character, or did you have who gets it?
Well, I knew from the beginning who was gonna, like, what was gonna happen, because again, I excel, right? We have a very clear roadmap in my world. But you know, I have my favorites. I call them all my murder babies. They're my murder children. I was called one time by a reviewer. They said I was a proud assassin mama, and I was like, yes. And then I added it to my Twitter bio. So, you know, I did. I wanted all of them to win because I want all of my murder babies to be happy and fulfilled, but they can't all win. So.
You've sold me on your book. I want to read your book. Yeah. My wife just said yeah, too. It sounds really good. Yeah.
If you like heists and you like morally gray characters, definitely. So in your most recent book, you have vampires, which are probably the most popular kind of supernatural villain. How did you write them, but make sure that they were unique and fresh, a fresh take on vampires?
Yeah, that's a good question because it is hard to be unique with them because they've been around forever. I mean, gosh, how long ago was Dracula written, right? And there's so many different takes. There's the sparkly ones, and then there's the real ones. I'll leave it in the heat. I've got heat now with this crowd. I tried to focus on the magical aspect of them to be unique. Because I know that there's probably been other vampire stories that have been extremely political. I strategically didn't read a lot of vampire stories or look into too much vampire stories because then you start getting into the idea of like, oh, well, I have to be so original that if I do anything that's similar, then I can't write my story. So I just tried to kind of lock myself away from any of that content. The only thing I did watch was Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. I love that movie. Great movie. But yeah, I tried to focus on the magical aspect and how they perform magically, and then I tried other little things. So like, for instance, they have taken over this region and they now secretly farm all the humans in that region without them knowing. So they all wear these like masks that have been made through magic.
You redeemed yourself.
I got you. It's a journey. So they have these masks that allow them to disguise themselves. So if you look at the cover, it's kind of back there, but you can see the main vampire, Countess Fiona, is holding up a mask and there's all these images projecting out of her. So the humans think they're being hunted by ghouls or werewolves or gargoyles or all these different things, but really it's the vampires doing it. And so that's where all those projections come from. So that was one aspect of the magic. And then the other was, since they're fat and happy, I made them foodies. So like they have different people on different diets, just like how we have like Wagyu or something, right? Like they get the humans to eat in a certain way so that their blood tastes a certain way. And they make certain delicacies out of the blood, like different blood truffles, different foods, and they match those humans' blood to that type of food. So I tried to do like little things like that I hadn't seen.
It's really cool. You guys should get it if you don't have it. Also, can we just talk about Peregrine because she is amazing and her moving house. Yeah, there is an amazing witch character in this book that I love. She's my favorite. Just gotta say. Okay, so we're gonna open it up to questions from the audience in just a second, but I'm gonna put you all on the spot and make you come up with a monster on the spot. So, what do they look like? What do they hunt?
So I'm currently working on a comic book right now that's a tie-in to my second book. I kind of leave characters off to the side in my stories so I can utilize them later for side stories with comics, like short comics. And I have a story I'm working on right now where this character is trying to track down all these different people who have these nanites that allow you to link directly like to the internet. And he finds that there's this abandoned building being run by this like maniacal scientist who's taken these nanites he's gotten, and the guy who created them is dead, so nobody really knows how to use them properly, but he's extracting them from himself and then putting them into people to try and control them, and it's not working, and they're like these sort of techno zombie monsters. They become like these rabid people that are linked up to the internet. They have Bluetooth. But yeah, so that is a monster I have right now that I'm working on. He's basically going through this very just derelict building, trying to get to this guy past all of these different like techno or cyberpunk zombies.
Cool. That's awesome.
So I don't write anything horror or scary at all. All of my monsters are human, which I also feel like is scary though.
Yeah.
Right?
Honestly,
So, yeah, I mean, like,
humans
legit.
are the scariest monsters.
They
so
are.
it's okay.
So okay, I'm gonna cheat. And you were talking about cyberpunk, and I'm working on cyberpunk right now. It's so much fun. I love it. I can use like cell phones in my stories, and that's new because I usually do fantasy. It's so fun. But yeah, so like the monsters in this story, they are just really greedy people, and like it's a world where they it's corporations that run the world, and the people, once they stop producing for the companies, they die. They just are killed. It's the kill switch. I'm gone. So I feel like that's pretty monstrous. And
Yeah.
I'm cheating because I did use that in my Excel document like 7 months ago that I built that there. So, I mean, I invented that on the spot.
Can I borrow your Excel document?
Yeah, no, I was going to say humans because I think we're the worst. I always make pretty much all my stories probably humans will probably destroy the earth and do whatever. So, or I will take my dark dwellers with like the spikes down the spine and the claws and what they eat. Well, I'll leave that to your imagination.
I feel like a lot of my stories, like the sort of humans are the biggest monster is definitely kind of there, but there are like also actual monsters. The ones I'm writing now is a planet that's sort of completely dominated by like horrible giant insects. So there's like greedy corporations, but there's also like 8-foot tall praying mantises with huge mandibles, and like they eat people, and some of them fly. So that's pretty good. Or but I always really like the monsters in these books, which are these just sort of like black masses of flesh that like grab any organic material and take it apart magically and add it to their own bodies. So they're like an amalgamation of everything they've ever eaten with like teeth and bones pointing out. No, actually, not recently. But I can see it. So those are always fun because you can always come up with new varieties. It's not horror, it's fantasy.
I still haven't decided if I should like try to come up with, because you asked me like to make one up right now. It sounded like
I did, but they all cheated, so you can cheat.
I'm like, should I cheat too, or? I mean, I don't have a great one.
You can use it in your book, that's fine.
It's a flying bunny. That feeds on intestines and has a barbed tongue that it uses to go in through the navel to get to the intestines.
I would also read
There's
that.
my off-the-cuff creature.
There you go. Somebody did his homework.
The difference between horror and fantasy is whether, when confronted with the like evil, horrible monster, you have a magic sword or not.
Valid.
All right, so it is your turn. Does anyone in the audience have questions for our lovely authors?
So you said that there are certain like tropes or like themes that you return to. Which ones are you like, never gonna write that, or I don't like that?
The virgin one.
Yes. Yeah.
understand that because again, it just makes women that our only gift or something is that. No, thank you. So that is definitely number one. Probably I will try to avoid again when you write. It's different than being a reader, but the miscommunication one, like when it's blatant, like yeah. So those two are my
Yeah, when you throw a book across the room and you're just like, just talk to each other.
There's gonna be times you're gonna have to use some form of that,
but they really can still hear me. But when it's just like to the point where like, you know, like it would be an obvious, like they would talk, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to make a reason like her life is on the line, her family's life is on the line, why she can't talk or whoever can't talk. But when you're just like, no, I'm just not going to tell him because I'm, you know, I'm mad at him. And then the whole world blows up. You're like, you're an idiot.
Yeah, I'll agree. The miscommunication one as well for me. Also, I mean, see, I want to say never because like I'll say like, oh, I'll never do the chosen one trope. But like, what if I came up with an idea and then now I look like a loser because it's on camera that I said that. I'm not gonna say never, right? But you know, it's just those are like the ones I generally tend to avoid, or like just like the white knight shining hero because all my characters are bad people and it's fun. So yeah, that's all I got.
That's a good point because I never thought I would write any type of romance specifically, and I don't feel that I'm personally like that's an avenue I can do very well, but there is some romantic interest in my second book. And that was hard for me because it's just generally I write adventure. I don't know, I'm a guy, I grew up with, you know, very adventurous stuff, and so it's kind of what I lean into. So yeah, never say never is a good point. I would say that probably one I don't think I'll do is like the good guys are actually bad. Just because I tend to write pretty heroic fiction. And so I don't really think that's something I'd necessarily explore, but you never know.
Yeah, I'm in the kind of never say never group also, but a bunch of the ones that I don't like have already been said. The chosen one in particular, you know, if I'm going to write a chosen one story, it's usually a subversion thereof, because I feel like a lot of chosen one stories sort of obfuscate the fact that it means someone is doing the choosing, and we don't, you know, often hear about who that is or why. So that's a big one. And the miscommunication one also makes me so angry. It's hard to write.
It's like, just get a cup of coffee and figure it out.
Right. I think I only use I have used it, but only if the person who is doing the like, well, I just won't tell them, is supposed to be like really dumb and awful. Yeah, like then okay, yeah.
So what's so funny to me is, if we were to write a chosen one story, like a classic farm boy chosen one, you would sell so many books. You know how many people want those? And the problem. Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah, it is absolutely still a thing. I mean, whether you can sell it to the publisher or not, that's a different story. But are they being purchased on Amazon? Let me tell you, yes. I have friends, man, who are making so much money on that.
And there's also dino porn on those.
Yeah.
And COVID.
I think it is easy to forget, like, as an author, we've all probably been reading books for like a really long time, and there are always new people coming in for whom the tropes are new, and like the reason things become cliche is because they work. And so like everyone uses them. So there's always somebody who's like, oh my god, Darth Vader is Luke's father? What a twist! Like, it's famous because it was mind-blowing for people at the time, and thus, you know, someone has to hit it for their first time all the time.
Vader in German means father, so.
The other one I was going to say is, ironically, another one that also makes a lot of money, which is love triangles. I can't do it. And I know a lot of people love it. I'm not saying.
Yeah, just become a triad.
That's why I just write married people, and then I don't have to worry about it.
Family man. I get it.
Any more questions?
What was the first piece of fantasy content that you consumed that made you want to write strings?
I know. My fantasy gateway drug, yeah.
It wasn't. This was pre-Excel sheets. I was like 8. Yeah. you know. Yeah, exactly. It was actually graph paper at the time. So Redwall. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Redwall books, Brian Jacques. I read all of them. Well, not all of them anymore, but like at the time, the ones that were out when I was in like 4th, 5th grade. My friends and I were obsessed. To the point, like, this is embarrassing, I don't care. We used to like play games at recess where we would pretend that we were like little mice and squirrels and we were fighting with our sticks and like, yeah, it's
No
so
badgers?
That's not a big.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not from the volcano mountain, Zach.
But yeah, so that was my fantasy gateway drug, and I just like never turned back. And then he was like, "Oh, but this is what I like to read. This is the stuff."
I'm going to show my age right here, but I was a Goonies Labyrinth girl, so I grew up right away, like, already, yeah. Goblin King was probably my first, like, oh boy, something's wrong with me, because I like that. So, it's David Bowie, I know, but that, to me, was where I think and I lived, girls, what? I really decided, like, that's where I was just always, I lived in the country too, so we were always out playing and some adventures and stuff like that, so I think that's where I started writing then, all those kind of stories, Goonies.
I was more into sci-fi as a kid, so I did a lot of, like Dune and Asimov and all that stuff. So for fantasy, it was really D&D, because I got into D&D as a teen, and it like dominated my life for all the way through high school. And so, that was my like fantasy. That was for sure. What?
Who did you play?
Oh God, so many different things, so many different people. I was mostly the DM though, because like, a lot of DMs that go on to be writers. In fact, you can say that I'm probably a writer because I just got frustrated with the stupid players. Right? Or not even the players screwing up the story so much as like not showing up for the game at a crucial time. Man, is that frustrating. Imagine if your main character is just like, sorry, I have homework tonight. Can't come and play in your story.
So I'm the exact same actually. Though I got started later, I read fantasy growing up, but I had never considered writing while doing it. When I was probably so I'm 35 now, about 10 years ago, I was a dungeon master for a group, and yeah, there was this moment where we were all at the table, like we had been playing for probably 6 months at this point, and they had all given me backstories, and I've been like weaving the backstory into the main storyline. Storm King's Thunder, if you've played that one, it's fun. And there was this moment where like I had weaved in a backstory, and there was this big reveal, and I ended the night with, I said this like line, it was like this dramatic line, and everyone at the table, like in person, gasped. And I was like, oh, I could do this. This is fun. It was so fun. Like that moment like, literally like changed me. I was like, I can like take this like, the regular storyline mixed with the other story. There's like this other storyline on top of it, and weave it all together. Yeah, it was just like, that was the moment where I was like, dude, I should actually take that story I was thinking about and like try to write it.
Oh,
Too late.
D&D is sort of involved in how I got into fantasy. I grew up mostly into comic books. I thought that's what I was going to write, was comic books. I kind of gotten tired of superhero stuff, but most American comic books or even manga, there wasn't so much fantasy. It was more just different types of adventure or crime fiction, horror, sci-fi, a lot of sci-fi. And then I had friends who wanted to play D&D. I had never played it. I had always been kind of around fantasy. I knew of Game of Thrones and stuff, but I just had never dove in. And then when they said they wanted to play it, I remember hearing about R.A. Salvatore's Dark Elf books. And so I was like, oh, it'd be kind of a cool primer is to read these Dark Elf books. And so I read that first trilogy, and it blew me away how good it was. And the cover was great. It was that new one that has like the 3 books combined. Everything was written so well, the combat was written so well, and I realized like, wow, all the things I love about this other heroic fiction can happen in here, but it's much more limitless with fantasy than with just like superhero fiction. That's part of the reason I got tired of it. So that was a big thing for me, was those books from R.A. Salvatore. And then when I read the Elric books, I don't know if anyone's familiar with those, they're really good, and the great thing about them is they're very short. So that taught me that you can have a world that's really big and very epic in a very short scope, which that's why all my books are standalones and they're all like 250 pages. Those kind of books taught me how to do both of those things. So those are my gateway.
Any more questions? Taylor?
Am I allowed to ask? Yes.
Obviously.
Okay. This is a thick as thieves question. Which, if you guys haven't read it yet, it's amazing. I always recommend it to readers as like the adult for Six of Crows. If you like Six of Crows, it's like perfect for if you.
She means Among Thieves, though, the first one.
Yes, the first one.
Yeah, if you haven't read Thick as Thieves yet, you are everyone.
Because that's the one we're most excited for. But the question is kind of regarding both. So the first one is, it's an epic heist novel with all of these people working towards one goal. But, spoilers. We sort of like split at the end. Now we're doing all of these like mini heists. So can you talk about the difference between writing like one epic heist of everybody together, and now we're all going to go off on these like mini adventures, and the difference? And I'm sure Excel came in handy.
I was literally just going to say, Taylor, so many more columns in my Excel document. Yeah, but no, legitimately, because you have all, I really do. I make color-coded Excel, and this is going to make the Panthers in the house barf, and I'm so sorry. But it's because it's, I'll do columns for every main plot, subplot, and character arc, and then I fill them in, and then I color code them, and then I can zoom out, and I can be like, oh, I'm a little light on this subplot here, and then I can fix it before everything is all woven together in a big, messy, tangled knot of words. It's much easier to fix that early. But yeah, so that was, really, Thick as Thieves is, I'm trying to think how many little heist parts there are. There's multiple heists that take place in Thick as Thieves, and we do have, our characters are kind of spread across the map. It's so fun. If you've read the first one, we really don't get to see much of the world, but I spent a very long time building this world, so you get to see a lot more of it in this one. And we get to explore it. You get to learn. A lot of people from the first book were like, gosh, I wish I knew more about the magic system. You're welcome, it's coming. So, you get to a lot more about the history of how it is. So, but yeah, it was different because I always do multiple points of view. And in the first book, all my different points of view, they're all in the same place, but it was so you kind of see the same scene from different perspectives sometimes, which was fun because then I'm hoping the reader's like, oh no, but that person's doing this. And it's like, yeah, they are. In this one, it was I had to jump to different POVs because they're literally thousands of miles away from each other. So that was a little bit of an adjustment, but I think in a fun way, because then I got to explore more of this big, beautiful world that I built. So yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Bryan.
Yeah.
Will you
Tough crowd.
ever write a book from the point of view of the villain? Because I love soap opera villains. I love the villain in general. They're usually my favorite. The more bad, the better.
So this is my mother, and she has been begging me to resurrect the villain from my second book, which I keep telling her is not going to happen. But she is going to write her own story, fanfic, and post it, and I'll have to make it canon. I do have plans with the villain from my first book to take him in a certain direction on a solo story that'll be kind of like basically his group. He's from a place called Kratos, and all the people they use all this different type of engineering, and they actually put sockets in their body so that they can attach different armor or weaponry to themselves. And so there's going to be their world is like Mad Max Travel Ravage. So there will be a story where he goes back to his world after being in prison for several years, and what his journey's like there. So there will eventually be a book there, but I'm not resurrecting the other guy.
She's like, if I ask in front of enough people.
This is how you know it's a fantasy panel, because the authors' moms are here.
How about the rest of you guys? Would you write a book from a villain's POV?
Oh, hell yeah. Oh yeah, I think I have. Actually, I brought one of my characters in the Darkness series, Lorcan, that was pretty much people hated, and I made him not hero, that's an awful word to use, but I made him the love interest, the one that people all of a sudden felt you fell in love with him and found out the backstory. Because no villain to me, when you write a villain that's just one-dimensional, I'm evil, like you have to write like why he's done this. They think they are doing something, like they're doing it for reason, and there's reasons behind all the choices they've made. So I like digging into that and finding, okay, this is why he's made these choices and he let himself be a villain in this and so I like that. Again, it's all that meat and potatoes and that contradiction, stuff like that. So those are my favorite people to write. I love all the gray characters, the villains. So none
They're
of
my favorite to read. So.
Yeah, and so none of mine are like, I have the true hero. Mine are all faults.
Yeah, I think I have already done that, actually. There's definitely a couple of books where you could describe the protagonists as villains. I'm trying to think how I can... I can't really get into it without spoilers, but yeah, it's fun.
Which book?
Probably Ship of Smoke and Steel. Our character at least starts out as a villain. And some of this, the characters are kind of each other's villains, which is a lot of fun. This one is two characters who are kind of the incarnation of each other's villain.
I will probably not. But there will be some short stories for my new series that will be from the villain's point of view.
Oh, I didn't.
I mean, in the first chapter of Among Thieves, my main protagonist cuts off someone's finger, and
yeah.
So yes, the way I tend to write books is like, there's some people that like are worse people than others, but like nobody is a good guy in the stories because they're all scrappy. I don't know.
Any more questions?
What is your favorite way to like start redeeming a villain or morally gray character for your audience to like turn their heads to be like, I am now rooting for this person?
Oh, that's a good question. That is a really good question. I feel like there are a lot of people though that have, if you don't like a character that is quote unquote an unlikable main character, which I feel like sometimes that is just code for like a female that doesn't like cow to people. But it's, it's though, right? Because I have heard like people are like, Raya is such an unlikable main character. I'm like, she's hilarious. Don't even. So I do feel like though, by giving them something like I like to give all of my characters like a character trait that is like unexpected or like kind of contrary to everything else about them, because real people are everything about them. We're like walking contradictions, all of us. And I feel like if you give them that touchstone of something that makes them relatable as a person, right? And it's kind of like that thing where like nobody, an evil villain shouldn't be evil just because I am evil and I do evil because evil. So as long as I feel like they have that point, my goal is, even if you hate the character, you're like, oh, I get what he's doing, but God, So that's my answer.
It helps when they're hot.
I would say, it's usually around the purpose of the what their goal is, right? And so if you can reveal more about their goal, it usually humanizes them. So like in Threadlight, there's a villain who name's Alabella, and she does some pretty messed up stuff. She like siphons people's blood and sells it, and also leads like a small army to slaughter people. But in the second book, you learn a little bit more. Like her goal is to like bring equality to everybody. She's like, it's messed up that some people are born with magic and other people aren't. So she wants to like make it available for everybody. And like that's the goal itself is probably a good goal, but the means maybe you can discuss that. But
I have a weakness for pairing a villain with a perfect cinnamon roll. And then that's exactly the plot of Ship of Smoke and Steel. And I've done it a couple other times, and it's so much fun.
Everyone's gonna go buy that one right now. Yeah. We all love cinnamon rolls. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well, I am going to ask each of you what's next, what's most recent from you. I know you have a Kickstarter you might want to plug. So we're going to do that, and then we are going to do the signing, and Taylor will do the giveaway. Who wants to start?
Sure. Well, I'm in a kind of weird place because this book just came out like a month ago, and I don't have another one that's like actually announced that I'm allowed to talk about yet. But I do have a new series starting next year I can't talk about it because it's not announced yet. I have some other stuff coming up which I also can't talk about. I'm doing some indie stuff which is not ready yet. So I'm in kind of like a transitional mode. We had a baby last year and it's kind of thrown the schedule off. But thank you. The baby is
the baby the chosen one?
I actually kind of think the baby is the chosen one because she sleeps at night.
Oh my God.
Right? Like
Oh yeah, or she's the villain.
I tell people that we have the best baby, other parents, and they're like, "Oh, it's cute. Everyone thinks they have the best baby." And I'm like, "My baby sleeps at night," and they're like, "I'm so jealous of your baby." But in the meantime, I have a Patreon, which with my wife Casey, she writes the Tea Princess Chronicles, which I highly recommend. And if you want to support us, and on the Patreon we have other author guests on and we talk writing craft and stories and stuff like that. So if you come and look, a bunch of that stuff is free, and if you're interested, that will be fun. So just Google Django Wexler. I have links to it.
Yeah, I won't talk too much about the Kickstarter thing. Ask me about it if you want to later.
They're so pretty.
They are very pretty.
They are really pretty.
Come on, man. Plug your stuff.
Just come up to me afterward. We can talk about it. But I don't have any books coming out this year. The third book in Red Light came out in August of last year. I'm going to be part of an anthology later in the year in December. It'll be the first look at the new series, which is called Symphony in the Skies.
That's a good title.
Thank you. And the short story is called The Snowmaker's Child. It's kind of a dark fairy tale-esque story. It's a little backstory of a villain actually in the new series. So yeah, no new books this year though, no full books.
So my book Silver Tongue Devil just came out I think a few weeks ago. So that's my pirate connected to the Collector Lightness saga, but it also connects to the Savage Lands. And then I'm finishing Devil in Boots, which is book 2 of that. And I also have a secret project with Victor Raoul, which if you look him up, he looks like Jason Momoa, just letting you know. That's going to be my contemporary. We're doing a secret project with that. And then I'm doing Ash's story after that. So, yeah.
Nice. So the sequel to One Piece, Thick as Thieves, comes out July 25th. So that's, woo, I'm very excited. I'm working on some other stuff, but I can talk about. But also, if you guys like sci-fi fantasy, you're cool people. I have a podcast. It's called SFF Addicts. I co-host it with the amazing Adrienne M. Gibson. He's fantastic. But we interview authors and talk to them. So we do 2-part interviews. One part is just like a regular interview where we just talk to them about all the cool stuff that they're doing, and then the other half we do like a mini master class where we dive into something they're really good at. So we just had Fonda Lee on last week. We're interviewing Christopher Paolini later this month. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, come check us out. We're everywhere podcasts are found.
Nice. I will look that up. I have a YouTube channel as well. I have a little poster I'll put out that has all my social media links. I just launched my new book, The Fear of Montcroy, in February, so just came out. But I do have a comic book that'll be coming out this year. There's already 5 or 6 pages that are complete. It's just going to be 22 pages. It's actually like a standalone story that's like an intro to one of the characters, so you can read that as like a side story to my new book. So that comic book will be coming out, and then I'm also working on another comic book that hopefully will be released in Anvil, which is the Iron Age magazine that should come out, I believe, in October, and that's going to be like the cyberpunk zombie one. So those are kind of the 2 that I'm working on right now.
Well, thank you all for that great discussion. Let's give them a round of applause.